Good morning and welcome. It's been a while to the Rocky Mountain Reformed Daily Devotional, and I want to thank you for joining us today and pray that you are doing well. This is our first such video devotional this year. Went the entire month of January, didn't do it. Several reasons. At the beginning of the month, I actually finally got COVID. I had gone the entire pandemic without getting it and caught it over Christmas break. For myself, just speaking for myself, it was really kind of like a bad cold. And when we got back here to Craig, I was just very tired and very fatigued, and really probably took me about the first 10 days of January to kind of get back to normal and feeling normal. But we're back in good health now and very thankful for the Lord's provision in that indeed. And just wanted to make a couple of comments about the last year, 2021. I had kind of been wanting to do this for a while, but had not. I think just some observations about where the evangelical movement and world is at this point. And what I'm observing, and I think what many of you have observed in the year that just passed in 2021, is a further fracturing of that world. And we've just seen more and more evidence of this. It seems like almost on a daily basis. There is a lot of strife within the Southern Baptist Convention, which is probably the largest, I guess, evangelical entity here in the United States. And because of the fact that the Southern Baptist Convention has so many churches, but also I think even more because the Southern Baptist Convention has 6 seminaries that educate a large chunk of evangelical pastors here in the United States, and not even mentioning the reach of their missionary arm, the International Mission Board, and then also their church planning arm, which is the North American Mission Board. Because of the largeness of those entities, the Southern Baptist Convention matters. I went to a Southern Baptist seminary. I went to Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Kansas City, Missouri. Very thankful for the education that I received there. I think when I was there, for the most part, the professors were pretty conservative. I really only had one professor that I would not label him as a liberal by any stretch of the imagination, but he had a very pragmatic approach to ministry. Let me just put it that way. But for the most part, overwhelmingly, I feel like I received a good theological education there. I think things have somewhat changed since I left. I mean, it'll be 10 years ago. It's been 9 years since I've been there. And so I think a lot has changed since then. I think some good and some bad. But the Southern Baptist Convention matters. I am no longer a Southern Baptist. And the church that I am privileged to lead, Sovereign Grace Community Church of the Yampa Valley, is not a Southern Baptist church. We have no interest in joining the SBC. And I think a lot of that is because of some of the issues that we see. And I think we continue to see the further fracturing of the SBC. On the one hand, you have those like J.D. Greer, Ed Litton, who is an extremely compromised Southern Baptist president because of his plagiarism scandal and his unrepentant plagiarism. He hasn't repented of it. He's made a lot of excuses for it, but he's never come out and said, hey, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done this. Really what Ed Litton needs to do, first and foremost, is he needs to step down from his pastorate. But I don't see that happening. And so you have men like him, like J.D. Greer, and others that seem to be leading the SBC kind of in a liberal drift. And it just seems like almost weekly there's some statement that's made. Men like James Merritt, who openly endorsed his homosexual son, who preached I guess you'd call it a sermon back in November at his church in New York City. And so just things like that. It just continues almost weekly, almost daily sometimes. And so you have men like that. And then on the other side, you've got guys like Tom Buck, Tom Askell, Alan Nelson, many, many others that are leading the fight against that. And I just see this further fracturing. I do not, this is just my opinion, and I pray I'm wrong. I do not see this improving. I think the SBC has reached the point of no return. And I think the time is going to come. I think you're probably going to see it this year. The SBC convention is going to meet this summer in Anaheim, California, which will be very interesting. I don't think there will be as many messengers that go because of the distance from, it's a long ways for most Southern Baptists. And I also think the fact that it's being held in California. I'm getting ready to go to the Shepherds Conference almost a month from now, and I know that we have concerns about the Shepherds Conference and the masking and all of the things that we're going to have to do that we're not used to doing. And I think that is going to keep a lot of people away from the Southern Baptist Convention in this coming June. And I think as a result of that, the trajectory that they are on is going to continue. And I think you're going to see more and more SBC churches, conservative SBC churches, withdraw from the convention. And I think what they have underestimated, and this is just an observation of mine, I think they have those in the leadership of the SBC, I think what they have underestimated is the deep frustration, almost anger of people over the Ed Litton plagiarism scandal. I think the continued ignoring of that and the continued propping up of Ed Litton by those in leadership in the SBC, and by that I mean seminary presidents like Danny Aiken, Adam Greenway at Southwestern, who he had him come and speak, and then had him he did a Q&A with him. They have underestimated, I think, the deep frustration and, yes, even almost anger of your average Southern Baptist church member. And I think they've underestimated that. And I think what's going to result is more and more churches leaving. I just read the other day, and probably some of you did as well, on servantsandheralds.com, Alan Nelson reporting on a church in his, I believe it's the Houston Baptist Church in Houston, Arkansas, very small church, like, thousands of Southern Baptist churches, and they are withdrawing, and yeah, they're, nobody probably cares, but I think you're seeing more and more of that. And so I think that's going to continue. And I think you're going to see more of that. And I think there's definitely, I think what you're going to eventually see is the Southern Baptist Convention will not be comprised as it currently is. And I think a lot of that breaking apart is going to start this year. On the other hand, I think the gospel advances. I think this is an exciting time to be in ministry. I think this is an exciting time to be a Christian, because I think it is becoming very clear what is real and what is not. This Sunday, I'm going to be preaching in Romans chapter 9, beginning in verse 6. And Romans chapter 9, verse 6 says this: "But it is not as though the word of God has failed, for they are not all Israel who are descended from Israel." We're going to talk about fake Israelites and real Israelites, fake Christians and true Christians. And I think it is becoming much easier to distinguish that in our current cultural moment. And I think that's exciting. And I think it's exciting what God is doing in his church. I think he is sifting the wheat from the chaff, and I think we're seeing that more and more each and every day. And so those are just some thoughts that I kind of wanted to share with you as we begin the new year. And I am prayerful here at Sovereign Grace Community Church of the Yampa Valley that God is going to continue to bless us. I do think we probably have some changes ahead of us this year. We have one elder that most likely is going to be leaving. Him and his family are going to be leaving. And so we're going to have some transition definitely at Sovereign Grace, but we know that God is faithful and we are trusting in him to raise up other men to serve as well. I just wanted to point out something that I saw this morning in my devotional time. And if you want, I want to invite you to open your Bibles to the book of Exodus, chapter 18. And I'm just going to read these verses. Exodus chapter 18, beginning in verse 37. And it says this: "It came about the next day that Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood about Moses from the morning until the evening. Now, when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, 'What is this thing that you are doing for the people? Why do you alone sit as judge, and all the people stand about you from morning until evening?' Moses said to his father-in-law, 'Because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, it comes to me, and I judge between a man and his neighbor, and make known the statutes of God and his laws.' Moses' father-in-law said to him, 'The thing that you are doing is not good. You will surely wear out both yourself and these people who are with you, for the task is too heavy for you. You cannot do it alone. Now listen to me, I will give you counsel, and God be with you. You be the people's representative before God, and you bring the disputes to God. Then teach them the statutes and the laws, and make known to them the way in which they are to walk, and the work they are to do. Furthermore, you shall select out of all the people able men who fear God, men of truth, those who hate dishonest gain, and you shall place these over them as leaders of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, of tens. Let them judge the people at all times, and let it be that every major dispute they will bring to you, but every minor dispute they themselves will judge. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you do this thing, and God so commands you, then you will be able to endure, and all these people also will go to their place in peace." It continues there to the end of the chapter that Moses did indeed listen to his father-in-law. His father-in-law was Jethro. He was a priest of Midian, and indications are here that Jethro actually became a believer, that he trusted in the one true God. What is interesting about this passage is this is very practical wisdom that Jethro is giving here to his son-in-law, Moses. And this was of great benefit to Moses and of great benefit to Israel. And this advice that he gives here has been praised, has been lauded throughout the centuries as just a great example of leadership, a great example of how to implement leadership, an example of delegation, an example of how to organize, how to be efficient. And this is used not just by Christians, but it is used in the secular world as well. But I want to focus on one thing, because woven into Jethro's advice are statements about God and the virtues of godly men. I want you to look, if you will, look at verse 21 and look at what Jethro says. And so when he's telling Moses, you need to pick these men, and here's what you need to look for when you look for these men to help lead. He says, you shall select, verse 21, out of all the people, able men who fear God. First of all, to be in spiritual leadership, a man must be a believer. Now, that seems kind of obvious, right? It is obvious, but you and I know that too many times we fill positions in churches just to fill positions. And we don't look for men who fear God above all else, who really are genuine believers. And so he says, Moses, you got to find men that fear God. Secondly, men of truth, men who have a deep, abiding understanding of the Bible and who apply the Bible and its precepts to their life. They are men of truth. And then the next one, he says, and those who hate dishonest gain. These are men who have integrity. They're not going to cheat their neighbor out of property. They're not going to cheat someone out of money. They're not going to lie. They're not going to shade the truth. These are men of integrity. And then he says, and you shall place these men as leaders of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens. Spiritual leadership has to be filled by men who are, first of all, believers. They fear God. They fear God over the fear of man, over the desire to be liked by men. I think that is what we are seeing in the evangelical community today, is so many of our evangelical elites, what we are discovering about them is that they like to be liked by men more than they fear God. That's number one. They have to fear God. Number two, they must be men of truth. They must be men of the Bible. They must be men who study the Bible, but also who apply the Bible to their lives in every aspect of their life. And then thirdly, they have to be men who are men of integrity. They are in their business dealings. If they're not a full-time pastor like I myself am, our other two elders at Sovereign Grace are not full-time. They are laymen, but both of them are men of integrity in their daily life. People know that they are men of integrity. And so that is so important. They have to be men of integrity, men of the truth, and they have to be men of God. Well, I want to thank you for joining me this morning, and I apologize that I have gone so long without doing these. I'm not sure how many of you enjoy these, but I'm going to start to try to do at least a couple of these a week, and I pray that they be a blessing to you. Thank you so much, and have a blessed day.